Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington. And I'm so excited today to be joined by Camille Robinson. She was on our Best Made Weddings podcast, one of the first ones, talking all about wedding invitations and designs. And I said, hey, we got to get you on and do your own one-on-one get to know your Wedding Pro episode. So thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, hi, I'm Camille, like you said, and I'm the owner of Robinson Creative House, previously known actually as Robinson Papery. I rebranded about 8 months ago, and I'll tell that story later. But I primarily do wedding invitations, save the dates, signage, day of goods, calligraphy, all that stuff. So anything that you can write on, print, or send, I can do it when it's related to your wedding.
That's great. Yeah, and I definitely do want to hear about that. I love and especially doing like all these podcasts now and the Best Made Weddings, people that are really good with branding and fun, ideas and all that. I love that, like all the marketing behind that and the philosophy. And so I definitely want to get into that too, because I do think that's so interesting and people that are smart about that and know how to brand. How did you kind of get involved in all this? What is it about this that kind of got you going and excited?
So this is actually kind of an interesting story. And I actually love telling this story because I find that it's partially motivational to that question I get all the time of like, how did you start your business? And I'm that true tale of you don't actually need like 25 years of formal training to do this. And so I have a twin sister who's also in the wedding industry, Karina Skrbecki Photography. And what the funny part about that is that a lot of people don't know we're related because she goes by her maiden name in her business and I go by my married name. And so unless they see us together or kind of know, Camille and Karina, they don't know that we're related. But she, at the time of her getting into photography, she was working at a graphic design firm. And she was offering a package, which was to shoot your wedding, but also design your wedding invitations. And she thought that would be a good foot in the door while she was building her clientele with photography. So photography started to pick up. At the time, I was working a desk job at an architecture firm. I was just out of college. I was doing marketing, which is what my bachelor's degree is in. And I remember her messaging me one day and saying like, hey, if I teach you how to use Illustrator, can you help me do some editing on these wedding invitations? And I was like, sure. And I was always dying to do more creative stuff on the marketing side. I was writing proposals all day. I was in healthcare marketing. And while it was great, I didn't do much design work. And so I was like, sure, I'll do it. And after time, she sent me more and more and was like, okay, I think I either need to take this out or like just have you do it. And I was like, you know what? This has been really fun. I really actually love this. I wonder if there's something here for me. So that was in 2014. And so what I did was open an Etsy shop with just pre-made templates of wedding invitations, baby showers, birthdays, stuff like that. And it took off and I was working full time and then I was doing Etsy orders at night and on the weekend. And I was working like 70-hour weeks. And I was like, this can't be my life. And so I made a plan to quit. And so I went in 2015, I went part-time and then I officially kind of went full-time on my own in the fall of 2018. So it was a slow stagger of moving away from a 9-to-5 desk job to doing this. I still sit at my desk 9 to 5, just not doing what I used to be doing. So that's kind of how it evolved. And probably from starting in 2015-ish is where I started to really nail down what I wanted to do. And what I found was the wedding industry in particular was kind of the cream of the crop. And for multiple reasons. One, it was a client that was going to spend a bit more money than like a baby shower or a one-time event. And B, they became a client that I would come back to me over a year or even two. By the time that I met them and said, we're doing save the dates, but then it was a year later was the wedding and then it was thank you cards. And then they would reach out to me because they had holiday cards. And so it was just the life, expectancy of a client was a lot longer. And that was enticing to me because it was a higher quality of client over time and just less turnover and burnout for me. So that's kind of how I stuck into wedding. But as you can probably see from my site, I offer a ton more stuff than that. Just But I will always do weddings. I love doing them. I've definitely scaled back on how many clients I take for wedding each year. And I feel like I've like fell into that kind of perfect mix of people approaching me because they like my style and they like, kind of the aesthetic that I have rather than me pitching, I'll do whatever you want. If you like it on Pinterest, I'll do something like that. It's people coming to me saying, oh, I love your work. I love this. I love how artistic you are in this portion. And the match is made there. It's not me just being a means to an end of something you saw in Vinted. So that was the shining jewel of, okay, a feeling like I've made it, and like here I am now being able to kind of pick and choose what I'm doing and really just loving what I'm doing and having full creative freedom. And someone just saying, I trust you, like if it's going to look like anything else you've done, that's fine. That's what I want. So that's been huge for me in probably the last year and a half or so. And so I'm just falling into that kind of stream of clients now, and I love it.
Yeah, no, it's so hard. I do think people balance that of wanting to, to please everybody, or like you said, really, focus on, what they're going to be successful. That's such a trope. Like they always talk, people like photographers starting out and they'll shoot anything for any amount of money. And then once you can, really pick your clients and stuff, it does. I just think it ultimately makes it more fulfilling. You get to do what you want to do and the clients appreciate that. I know that we had talked on the other podcast too. I think even just now with everything going on, I think there's just so much more conversation being happening between us and our clients. And I do ultimately, I like that. I think it's nice to just feel like, and like you said, you get people that are, really in tune with what you want to do, and you guys are able to have that conversation. I think it's great. How did you, so when you got in with marketing and all of that, how did that track record go? What did you study in school, and what was the philosophy behind that?
Yeah. So when I say that you don't need formal training, I mean like you don't have to major in it. And I say this with a grain of salt because I've always loved art. I've always loved to create. I took IB art classes in high school. I was always that person that was drawing anytime we had to make. I always remember those like tri-fold presentations you had to make on those huge poster boards. And it's like I would spend hours on those, like lettering all the headers and, doing borders on the pictures and hand drawn elements and painting and all that. And I loved art always. When we got to college, part of it was actually my twin sister and I were in the same sorority. We went to the same school, and my parents are like, you guys should major in something different, and there was a part of me that at that point, I still think that there is this, kind of stereotype with being a creative that there's no money in it. And I definitely was in that boat. I was like, there's no way, like, I'm not going to study art. I'm not going to make a living doing art. So I went to business school. So I got into business school my sophomore year at UW, and I spent 3 years in that. And I majored in marketing and then minored in sales. And so I left just basically, and I feel like marketing is a little bit of a catch-all. So I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And when I was in college, I was like gung-ho on sports marketing. I was an athlete growing up. I had interned at the Seahawks, the Sounders. I worked for the Sonics before they left. And I definitely was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I quickly realized in that industry, it's a lot of work. And while I loved it, I was like, okay, I got to see what else is out there. So I left UW in 2009 in a recession, and I was having a really hard time finding work. And I kind of bounced around for a while. And I landed at the kind of the architecture, the AEC industry, they call it. So architecture, engineering, construction. I worked at a bigger firm that did architecture. I jumped to a smaller place that did outreach with public projects. And that's kind of where I went the marketing route. And I don't ever want to say that I'll say two things. I do partially regret not doing the art thing because I see the path that my sister took. She went to the design school at UW, graduated in visual communication design, and I was like envious of her job. Every day she was going to work, and she worked on projects like Tatcha and Gatorade and was designing all these packaging things. And I was like, oh my God, why didn't I do that? I was like, that's what I wish I had done. So part of me was wanting to get back in that, but I also felt like the business school part was so valuable for me to be an entrepreneur. And I don't know if you remember this or had this at your high school, but I had DECA in high school, and it's like basically like a business competition curriculum. So you go to the classes for it during your school period, but then you compete outside of school hours. And I always competed in the category of entrepreneurship. So every year I competed, I would make my own business plan. I'd have to present it to like a list of panelists. So think like Shark Tank almost. And if I passed that, I went from local competition to state competition to nationals. And I loved it. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm good at this sort of business thing. And so I always look back, I'm like, I swear if BG Sherman is listening to this, who was my DECA teacher, he's the one who started me down that path. I mean, in 2001. So yeah, I think that business side of thing really set me up for not feeling quite as scared to make that leap. I feel like all of that training and what I learned in finances, accounting, bookkeeping, marketing, all that was like played a really vital role. And I still am that person who will Google, how do I charge state tax on something? Like, I'm not scared to kind of figure it out, but I also know that that's definitely been something that's held people back before. So I'm grateful for that experience. And then I had to basically learn how to do what my business is from scratch, and kind of with some training. And I took a lot of classes online and just sort of tried to learn all the programs, and then just went from there. So yeah, definitely. I think the whole high school, college thing in business helped create Robinson Creative House.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If I would give anybody any advice, study business, study accounting, study finances. I mean, I have a broadcast journalism degree, which I remember getting, and then I went to, my first news station, and like, you didn't need a journalism degree to be a news videographer,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that I like spent all this money. But like you said, knowing, and I guess with the business stuff, like right now with all the unemployment and the PPP and everything, and like looking like at all these other wedding vendors, and they have like no idea like what money they make or what expense, like just have no idea of like running the business. Like, man, like we would all be so much better off if we had business degrees.
Yeah. And it was like, I definitely had to like kind of go back and be like, all right, what did I learn about profit and loss statements? Like, and it's like, but I did feel a lot better setting up from the beginning. And that's like a definite like advice I have for anybody is you don't have to have all your ducks in a row, but like having a really good understanding of the operations behind the scenes of how you're going to run stuff before you start is very valuable. And I kind of had it all there. I was like, I mean, it's sort of embarrassing to say now. I was like recording everything in a Google spreadsheet. I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So it's like figuring out how to get set up with QuickBooks and how to send invoices and how to make sure that all of that is tracked for me. And it's like, I got to the end of the year and I was like going through my credit card statement of like, which of these was a business expense? It's like, okay, lesson learned, get a business credit card, open up like everything under my business name. I don't ever have to look at it. It categorizes it for me, like all this stuff that I was like, okay, there's definitely tips and tricks out there that will help you. But getting that set up and not having to redo it like 2 years down the road, like I did, is definitely something I would advise people to do.
Yeah, if I could go back and start over again, I would nail it. I would nail it the second time. My wife will be mad if I interviewed someone that went to UW and was in the sorority, and if I didn't ask what sorority you were in.
I was a Kappa Delta.
Okay, she was Chi Omega, so I don't know what that means.
Okay,
I didn't
Chi-O,
I didn't go to. I went to Gonzaga. We didn't have fraternities or sororities.
A Greek system. Yeah, my husband went to Western, and they didn't have a Greek system either. So when I talk about it, I like almost assume people know. And I honestly loved my experience. There was definitely, highs and lows of being in a house with 86 other women for 4 years. But I definitely like some of the relationships I made there. And I will say for both my sister and I, after we started our business, like some of our very first clients were sorority sisters of friends that we had made when we were, 18, 19 years old that are now getting married and looking for wedding invitations, for photographers, for baby shower invites. It's like we basically had a set of clientele of 30 of us that are all going through these life changes at kind of the same time. And it was amazing. And I still, to this day, like I'm even working on a branding project right now for, so if Kaylee's listening to this, hi Kaylee, for a branding project for her. And it's like, I've known her since high school. We're in the same sorority, and I think it's just like such an like easy way to meet other people that, even if they weren't the same major or the same friend group, like they can tap on that and being like, oh, I remember that she did this. And so, yeah, that's also been very valuable.
No, we God, like 3 or 4 years ago now. I did for a couple years. I did the recruitment videos for Delta Zeta. I think that's one of them there.
Yeah, DZ. Okay.
And as someone that had never, I did not ever set foot in the fraternity and the sorority at all. That was a really crazy experience. Like have to go in and like film in there and like, I don't know. It's awesome. And I think it's great, but it is like it was a very alien world for me to walk in there and be like, what is going on? Like this is crazy.
Oh, 100%. I remember when my husband, for the first time he came, because we met in college and he came to the sorority and he was like, and when he was going to come pick me up to go on a date, I was like, second big white house on the right. I was like, it's like massive. And he's like, oh, you're at a sorority. I'm like, yes. And it's like, I think it is a little foreign. I don't think twice of it, but it definitely was. I kind of just described it as having, like a smaller subset of friends that you could go to class with, play sports with. I still play basketball with some of the girls that I've met in that sorority. And with UW and probably with Gonzaga too, just how big of a school it was. Like it felt daunting to be walking on a campus with 40,000 other students. And so the fact that there was 100 of us that were all kind of going through the same thing at once, it made it really nice. And I think having my twin sister there helped tremendously. And her and I could kind of lean on each other going through things and schoolwork and all that. So that was great.
How'd you meet your husband if you were at UW and he was at Western?
I knew you were going to ask this. So, a friend of mine, she was a freshman when I was, so the same class, she went to high school with him. And so, especially during freshman year, I felt like on the weekends, you kind of went back to your hometown so she invited a bunch of us up to her hometown, Anacortes, which is my husband's hometown. And she had, invited some friends over. And so we all met there. And so it's always funny because a couple weeks later, I invited him to what we call in the Greek system a grab a date, and which is I got to bring a date for this kind of pre-planned themed party, and I invited him, and I wanted him to come down, and I'm sure him walking into the fraternity that we were pre-funking out was a little weird, but yeah, we that was in 2007, and we've been together ever since. So this year we're celebrating. Next month is 8 years of marriage and almost 14 years of being together. So it's a little crazy, but
that's good.
He stuck with me. Apparently it didn't scare him away.
That's good. No, that's awesome. How you had talked about, cause I think your year, cause I graduated in '08 and you were '09, and I've actually talked with a lot of vendors, on this podcast, we're all around the same age. And do you feel like, entering the job field in that recession kind of market shapes how you like? I know for context, when I got hired in my first job down in California, and 3 weeks after I got hired, they laid off like half the newsroom because of, there was, all this different stuff. And so it's always really shaped me and made me like really, even now that I have my own business, like I'm very scared all the time about like making sure, and like we have enough money saved and enough things and enough like whatever. Do you feel like that has shaped you and how you look at like running the business, having, not that we were running businesses at that time, but having jobs and seeing how hard it was to get work?
Oh, totally. And I remember, so I got a job, I graduated, June 2009. I moved back home, not in with my parents. So my parents were at that time renovating / flipping my grandmother's house, which was about a mile away from their house. So in trade of free rent, I was in charge of helping with the renovation. So I was living somewhere that literally had no walls around the bathroom. Like there was just a toilet in the middle of the room. I was the only one living there, so it was fine. But like no floors. I set up a little office in the corner. I had to be like, studs. And I was like, I remember thinking like, this can't be it. Like I'm jobless. I've moved home. I'm living alone for the first time in my life because even before college, my twin sister and I shared a room with my parents. Like it just like I was alone for the first time, and I was like, okay, I got to find something. And it took about, I got a job probably 6 months after, and it was for a company called Health Force Partners. And I loved my experience there, but after 6 months of working there, I got laid off. So that was in 2010, and it was like great, back at square one. And I mean, like you said, they laid off 90% of the workforce. They sold to a different company, so really only the directors were remaining. And so I was back at square one. And I remember taking a job again in the healthcare industry. I was working for UW Health System, and I remember just taking that, being like, this is where I got to find something else. And like from the very first day that I landed at UW, I was job searching. I was like, this is literally to pay my bills. Like, I don't love it. I like am not passionate about this. I'm clocking in, clocking out, putting my head down, getting the paycheck. But I was like, this can't, I need to find something. I can't do this every day for the rest of my life. So at that time, I also just, I think you're right. It really sort of shook me of what it could be like without having work, or working in a place that I wasn't happy. And it's like, I feel like it may even be more of a female trait. And I talk about this because my husband is the polar opposite of me, of like, I need to be creatively fulfilled, and I need to feel like I am passionate and making a difference in what I do every day. And it doesn't have to be like, solving world hunger or anything like that, which would be nice, but of just going each day and feeling like I'm happy, and I'm not dreading it. I'm not like just hitting snooze 9 times before I go. And so I think that because I experienced that right off the bat when I got out of college and knew that that was definitely a possibility, I think I worked really hard to make sure I set myself up to be in a position that when I did start my business, I had savings, I had a default plan, I had goals set up for when I wanted to hire my first employee, and kind of just knew that like if it really crashed and burned, then fine, I'd go back and start looking elsewhere. But I knew that just living every day and not loving what I did was not how I wanted to spend my life. And the comparison I make about my husband is he's been at the same job since he's graduated college, and he does, he loves, I wouldn't say love, maybe that's a strong word. He's good at what he does. He's very good at what he does, but it's like all the other aspects of that work are like perfect for him. The commute is great. There's a Starbucks in the lobby. He gets along with his boss. They hang out outside of work hours. He's gone fishing with him. Like, everything other than the work itself is like it's like fulfilling for him. And for me, I don't care if it was like around the corner and I had the best benefits in the world and all that. But if I went to work every day being like dropping my forehead on the desk, like I can't do this anymore, I would quit. And so I think I knew that I was like, okay, I can't work for anyone else. I need to do what I want to do, and set it up in a way that like allowed me to do that without worry. And I think that's something too that, like you said, is like I knew that there was a potential of not getting work right when I start. I don't know what the statistic is, but something like 50% of small businesses fail within the first year, and that wasn't an option for me. So I'm so lucky that I had the support system I had, with my sister being able to send like invitations and all that design work to me, and my husband literally just saying, "Go chase your dream. Like we'll do whatever it takes," and put me on his insurance. With healthcare, I was worried about that, of not having health insurance, all this stuff. And he was like, "We're married. Just do it. Go do what you need to do." And like, I mean, I would work till 1 or 2 in the morning on all weekends. He took care of like, he'd bring me dinner in my office. Like, I'm so thankful I had the setup I did when I did. Cause I don't think I would have made it if I didn't have that support system in place.
Yeah, it's so interesting, like you said, and I don't know if it's a male female thing. I think it is just some people are wired to want more,
Yeah.
but it's so interesting because like even when I left, I was at Q13 and there was probably I don't know 25 photographers right on or videographers. We call them photographers, but videographers on staff, and like that's what I always said. Like any one of you guys could have like left, right? Like I was just the
Yeah.
one that had the motivation to leave. Like I wasn't necessarily like better at any like discernible, trait than just like having than just being bored there
Yeah.
and wanting to go do stuff, but it is just that like, and it's some people have it and some people don't. And it's really interesting. And even like some of the videographers that work for me are great, but they don't want to, they just want to come on and do it and then go home. And it's just a special
Yeah.
kind of whatever, like you said, that wants more and wants to, have that creativity and just feel like, I just think, feel like your time's being valued, like feel like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting, and I don't know why, and I still don't know why some people have it and some people don't. But that's what are the conundrums?
Oh, 100%. I think it's like it is, and it's not to say that, that people who don't have it aren't driven or motivated or anything, but it's like this like craving of just building something of my own. And it's like being able to make all the decisions around it and kind of form it to what I want it to be. And I think there's a lot of, that imposter syndrome that comes with that is like, am I good enough? Am I going to make it? And it's especially living in a social media ridden world where there's so many other influencers and creatives that have hundreds of thousands of followers and have built these businesses and are, they are now marketing how they're 6-figure salaries, blah, 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 from doing paintings. And it's like, it's daunting. It's like, how did they get there? How did they do that? Am I good enough? Will people even buy what I want? It's like, and occasionally I do get those people that are like, never mind, you're way too expensive. Like they don't value that. And I ironically actually have talked about this recently is just like sort of selling your value and like explaining your value to somebody who maybe doesn't understand what it takes to do what I do is difficult. And part of it is not, I don't find it like, no one's ever mean or rude about it. It's just educating them that it's like, look, I sell this for $150 because I go to Home Depot, I get the wood, I cut it down, I sand it, I stain it, it dries overnight, I stain it again, I polish it up, I letter it, I seal it, and then when all that's said and done, $150 for 8 hours of work is nothing. And so it's like when they'll say, "Oh, well, I found it on Etsy for $30." I'm like, "Great, go buy it on Etsy." Like, I was like, "But I know my value and my time," and it's like I've gotten to that point where like saying no is such a mental health thing for me of being like, I'm not going to do it because you want me to. Like, if you're willing to pay what I feel like my time is worth, then I'll do it. But that's definitely something of like in industry, especially in a creative industry, of someone like explaining like, you know, they see something in the store and they're like, I could do that. Wow, that's $300. Like I could make that. I'm like, okay, go make it. Like that's fine with me. But so I think that's interesting. It's like having that sort of drive and that motivation to kind of do that also comes along with like, you just have to have some balls. And I feel like I struggled with that in the beginning a lot. And, not being a people pleaser with clients and saying no and saying, I don't do that or I don't offer that. And I think that's something that comes with starting your own business. I'm sure you've felt that too, when people are like, well, so-and-so will shoot the wedding for this much money. And it's like, well, that's great. If that's what you want to hire or, be my guest. But it's like, I think it's so interesting because it feels wrong when you do it, but you have to be successful. And I feel like that's just even been a recent lesson of mine.
Yeah, no, I definitely think we're always learning, right? And always trying to kind of like you said, like gain that self-confidence. It's funny because my neighbor's he is like a contractor, and he always talks about if like a plumber comes to a house and there's something and they fix it in 5 minutes and they go, okay, well that'll be $300 or whatever, and the person goes, well, you were only here for 5 minutes, how can you charge $300? And you go, well,
Yeah.
because that's the 10 years of knowledge I have, right, and all the tools
Right.
and expertise and everything that allows me to solve that in 5 minutes, right, versus like you spending 40 hours trying to fix it or whatever, but it's
no 100%. Yeah. It's exactly right. And, before we started the podcast talking about having contractors here for working on stuff, it's like, sure, I could probably figure out how to do the drywall piece, but like, it's totally worth the money to pay someone else to do it faster and correctly. And it looks beautiful. And they're probably, I'd save maybe $3,000, but I see the value that they bring and the fact that they can do it so perfectly. And it's exactly that. And I feel like it's really hard for people to comprehend that. And like, it's definitely, I think it's in every industry too. It's in, the quick fashion industry of, there's a top for sale for $15. And it's like, the same thing could be sold in a little boutique mom and pop shop here for $55. And it's the same thing, but it's like but you're paying for someone who's probably researched their vendors and, it's sustainably made and all these things that you might not think about other than price. So that's like some of the things that I often tell people when I'm like pitching, like, well, you're getting my 10 years of learning how to do this and not do it, a certain way and correctly and not fast, but with quality and all that stuff. So I hear you on that.
It's so interesting. I just one of my DJ friends had emailed me like a week or two ago and said, "Hey, we have a bride that we're doing a lot of live streaming right now with everything." And he said, "Hey, this date, whatever." I said, "Oh yeah, we're available." So then like the next day he goes, "Well, that didn't work out." And he like showed me the email and it was like, "Hey, so and so, my friend Reed's a videographer. He can live stream." And they're like, "Oh, we have no interest in paying for that at all. Like we're just going to have a phone. Like, we have no, like not
Yeah.
total non-starter, right? Like totally not whatever."
Yeah.
And then day before yesterday, I just was sitting and I got a call and it was that bride, right? And she had like sat on it. And then even I think when we like started the conversation, she was like, we don't like, that's too much. Like you need to like, can you, and I was giving them like a pretty good, just cause it was like a Friday and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
And, but like through the conversation, I'm like, well, like we can provide, the private link and all this stuff and people can get it and you don't have to worry about this and all this other stuff. And, but then like you said, here's someone that was like a total non-starter like a week ago. And
Mm-hmm.
then it did feel good to like be able to, because like you said, it's hard that balance, right? Like you can't fight everybody on like your price and your worth and like,
Yeah.
you can't win every battle. And I wasn't even trying to fight the battle, right? Like I just had the phone call come to me, but it was interesting to like see it go from this like total non-starter, less than a week or two ago to like, I sent him a contract, yesterday, right? And so it is nice to win those fights sometimes, when when those
Yeah.
victories come.
Totally. And I feel like I have a sense now, like it's almost my sixth sense of like, I know from the very first email what this is going to be like how this correspondence is going to go. And it's shocking to me because I feel like for me too, and it's maybe because I own a business and I understand the kind of like blood, sweat, and tears that goes into doing this. But there's a big difference between someone emailing me and saying, I love your work. And attaching some photos and saying, I've always, I've followed you for a while. Like, I really like how you do this, your approach to branding, blah, blah, blah. And, I'm more willing to work with somebody like that and maybe even provide a discount or some sort of extra freebie throw in for somebody who values me as an artist versus the person who emails and says, how much is this? And it's like, okay, well, if you're price shopping, I'm probably not the person for you because we'll just lay it out there. I'll gladly tell them. But it's like when I can start the conversation by somebody already understanding the value that's there, it's a much easier and harmonious relationship that moves forward of not having this constant, well, what if I just took off 5 of these here and added 1 here? What's the itemized list? It's like, I get that there's budgets and I'm happy to work within a lot of different ranges. But it's always hard for me because I know that a lot of the decisions that I will have to make creatively and the materials I choose and the finishes and the embellishments are already off the table. And so it's hard because it's like, I want you to give me the basket of everything that we could potentially do. Let me steer you a certain way of how the design could go, what we could include a wax seal or embellished this or a hand tied ribbon, all that, and then give you the price that goes with that. And if it's a little too much or you want to see some options, I'm willing to work with that rather than trying to fit in, the champagne dreams on a beer budget. And so that's like something that I definitely have learned how to do over the years and kind of have like that sense of like, I already know how this is going to go. So let me not waste your time.
No, it's interesting, yeah, because in the videography world, tons of what's your rate? What's your rate? What's your day rate? What's your half rate? What's like
Yeah.
like I'm like your rate is whatever it is for me to get up and leave the house in the morning, right? And
Right. Exactly.
if they're doing the NHL, Kraken announcement, right? Maybe I don't want to
Yeah.
go book a shoot, or maybe, and so I'm like, if I'm not doing anything, but it's, and not to like that you're undervaluing people, but I just mean like, it's all, like you said, if you find someone that appreciates what you want to do, you might be a little more willing to work on that versus, like how much does this cost? What is, what can we take off of
Yeah,
this
and like
together
no
to,
salutation, no, like you
yeah.
don't have to flatter me and say you love me. I'm like, but just saying like hi, or or at least getting my name right or something like that, like that would be helpful.
I want to talk about, so transitioning into starting your business, right? Like you said, working, part time over, over the years, right? Trying to do it.
Mhm.
Um, what are some lessons you learned from that, or what was maybe, you know, I know that just so many people nowadays, are like trying to do that, and I do think that people don't necessarily, they think that they can skip that transition time, right? That they're like, well, I want to
Right.
be a photographer and I'm going to start tomorrow or whatever. And so like, what was the hardest part about that, or a lesson you learned, or something to, to really put the time in to make that transition to set yourself up for success?
Yeah, this is such a big question because I feel like it's very different for everyone. I was very scared about just not having work. And I'm sure that's probably a very legitimate fear. No one's going to book me. So in the transition, I feel like what I started doing right away was, recording the sale or whatnot and seeing kind of, okay, I'll need X amount of wedding clients a month to pay my mortgage. Then I started going, okay, well, now that's set. So, how many sort of lettering, calligraphy, signage things could I add on? And would that cover my bills portion? So, I kind of had to back out. I made my Google spreadsheet. My husband would be so proud. Color coded everything of, and the biggest thing for me too was how much did I need to bring in to live the lifestyle I'm living right now? So, there's one thing to bring in to like barely squeak by, which I knew I needed. There was months that had happened. But I wanted to be set up where I didn't feel pressured or guilty for getting a $5 Starbucks one morning, or, going out with my girlfriends on the weekend, or vacationing with my husband. Like I still wanted to be able to do those things. So my transition, I feel like, was actually a bit longer than traditional. I feel like I definitely just, I don't know, I had that fear of like not being enough and not making enough. And when I did make the transition, I actually think I could have done it sooner, because the amount that I was still working in my part time job, and I basically was working two full jobs. And and at that point I was like, okay, I could probably have done that sooner. I'm glad I waited. I didn't, nothing bad happened. But my transition was probably over the course of 4 years. And so, I think that's something, like you said, people expect overnight or right away. And building a clientele base doesn't, getting out of that only orders from family and friends zone takes a while. And it's like, especially doing a lot of the Instagram, marketing and showing examples. And, people want to say, well, can you show me an example of this kind of work? It's like, well, my answer is I haven't done that kind of work. So it was setting up, I basically made a bunch of fake wedding suites and photographed them and put them on my website. It's like, people are such visual intakers of products that it's like, it's so necessary to have good photography. And I think I remembered right when I was starting, I had just finished reading the book, and I'm like blanking on the name right now, but she was the CEO and founder of Nasty Gal clothing line, from San Francisco. And she started selling on eBay. And she said what set her apart 100%, and this is why she like literally boomed in years, was taking good photography photos of her products. She's like, it is crazy how someone can go to a site, and I talk about this when I talk about branding with my clients too. If your site looks like it was made in a 1992 WordPress, your client is clicking X. Like they are leaving the site, they are not going to do it. If it's difficult to navigate, if it doesn't have clean branding and a clear vision, people are going to leave. And it's something that I knew I wanted to set up before I left fully. That like that first day I sat at home by myself, full time doing Robinson at the time, papery, that I had all that set up. And so that's something I feel like is super important, is like know kind of what you want to do, how you want to create your brands, and spend some time building that clientele. I'm sure you didn't leave, with nothing on the books and just said like, well, hope it goes well. Like I know that most people start that time to build it up. And it's like that first time I got that client that emailed me and said, I found you on Instagram or Pinterest. I live in Ontario, Canada. I know no one you know. And they're like, I want to work with you. I'm like, okay, here we go. We've made it. Like this is the first time someone hasn't been like, oh, I was talking to your mom and she said that you do invitations, or, they know my sister-in-law or something like that. So it's definitely something I worked on for so long before I left in that transition period.
Yeah, it's such a frustrating thing for me. My wife has a lot of friends that do the like, I don't know, all those things that you sell to all your friends, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like you're just selling to your friends like all the time. And I get so frustrated because my dad was in advertising, and we don't. I mean, we get like referrals and stuff, but I'm not one of those people that's like, I don't spend any money on advertising. Like everything comes from referrals.
Yeah.
Like I spend a lot of money on like my website and advertising and directory, memberships and all these different things, right? And so I'm
Totally.
like, it is like infuriating to me to see like, oh, like, hey friends, like looking to sell some, like, and give me an
Yeah.
extra, that extra, like, I need my coffee money this week trying to sell stuff. And you're like, you get outside of, yeah, you have to break that wall of, just your Facebook friend circle, or like, your mom's friends or whatever. And it's not a business until it's outside of that. And like you said, until you're getting those
Totally.
people that are like, I have no connection to you in the world. And like, that's
Yeah. You're
awesome,
like,
right?
oh my God.
But then it feels like you said, that it's totally clicking, right? That like what you're doing is working. I mean,
Yeah.
what was that like? And I want to talk to, we want to touch on the transition too, between the papery to the creative house. So what was it like, now that this is like a thing, we're blowing up, right? I don't know, whatever word you want to use. But what was it like then really coming into your own, and how did that feel, and what was that transition like then?
Um, Gosh, that feeling was, I mean, it's kind of indescribable. Like I'm not one to like, I don't know. I felt proud of myself for the first time in a long time of being like, this was really just me working my ass off and pulling long nights and weekends and getting up early and working on my lunch break, and knowing that like, I don't ever think there's like a right time to like, to really say you've made it, but there's just a certain cadence of, the kind of traffic that you get to your website and people contacting you for different projects across the country. I got my first, couple international clients. It's like that to me makes me feel like, oh my God, like there's somebody in London who wants to work with me in here. Like, why? It's like I don't own a brick and mortar. I don't own, 5 different teams across the globe. It's just like it feels really special. And it's like, and unless you know somebody who owns a small business, it's like you do a happy dance every time that somebody books you, and it's like it's just such a amazing feeling. And I definitely like making that transition was huge, and it's actually what sort of sparked that rebrand for me. So when I was Robinson Papery, I was just doing invitations and like paper products essentially. Um, and the name, to be honest, I don't really know where it came from. Obviously, Robinson's my last name, but the papery part, I've like, oh, it sounds French. Like it sounds like boutiquey and cute and all that. But I got a lot of confusion because people were like, are you a paper maker? Like there's actual legitimate people out there who make handmade paper. I'm like, nope, I do like the design work for it. So I felt like there was that. And then there was the branching into other aspects. I also do like signage. So I work with acrylic, I work with wood, I work with leather, I work with a bunch of different mediums that aren't necessarily paper. And I've started branching outside of weddings. So doing signage for a coffee shop and redoing their menu on a chalkboard. I was doing branding projects for a personal training facility. It's like I was like, there's got to be a way to fully encompass all the services. And so I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do a rebrand, I want it to be thoughtful and sort of intuitive, that when you come to Robinson Creative House, it's the house is incorporating a bunch of different creative outlets I have. So that's where I split into, I offer stationery, I offer branding, and I offer signage and lettering. And so it's very easy for people to navigate based on project, what that relationship will look like, what the pricing looks like, and kind of what their needs are. And so part of it was just organizing on my back end of kind of making my life easier. Because from a scheduling standpoint as well too, it's now easier for me to look at my calendar and say, okay, I'm booked for branding for this month, but I have an opening September 1st, stuff like that. And then in there, I can kind of sprinkle other stuff. And I also started to transition into more like a full service wedding shop. And what I mean by that is I basically build everything. So I'm working with very few, other than like my vendors who are printing on fabric for me or something like that. But if there is a seating chart that's made of wood and acrylic and a stands, like I'm building that with my husband in my garage. And it's like, I'm trying to kind of create that full from when we talk and we're sending save the dates. I do all the assembly, I source the postage, I do all the lettering. We meet again for wedding and we're doing the suite. And then for the day of, it's like I'm doing a seating chart installation. I'm working with, someone to create a hand lettered neon light for above the bar. Last year I did my first hand lettered dance floor. And it's like all these things that I'm sort of able to now show my client that I can do, that they didn't know I could do before under the Robinson Papery name. So I feel like it's kind of opened the box for me of the type of projects I can do, which has been great because variety has been like keeping me on my toes lately, especially with a lot less weddings. But yeah, that's kind of how that transition went with the business name and business change.
No, and when talking about business names, is someone that you'll never get away from the client confusion. As someone that's named Best Made Videos, and every week I get an email. Do you guys do photography? I'm like,
yeah,
but
I'm sure that's a lot. Or to a photographer, like, do you do video? No.
but talking about, because I was such a dummy kind of when because when we got started, we're getting started and like our weddings are like not nice weddings, right? We're getting there. And then but like getting to meet like a lot of like you guys and like the designers and stuff, like I had no idea like all that, because I was totally like the person like, oh, it's like the invitation suite, like that's it, right? And had like no idea, like you said, like all the other stuff that you guys are capable of doing. And I don't think that most people even think to like ask, to even ask like, oh, can you help me with that too? Or can you help with that? So I do think like it's so important, for people just to, because I'm like in the wedding industry and I was a dummy. So like, let alone, people, but they just don't think about that. Right. And so I think it's so cool, like you said, and just how much, it's just the whole process, from like designing the stuff. And then, like you said, physically like staining the wood and whatever. I just think it's so cool to like get to see that project the whole way through. Where like video, I can't do anything artistic, right? I mean, we just like, like anything that's pretty.
I doubt that.
But it is, but I think it's so cool to be able to take that the whole way through. And I do feel like, and I mean it, that you guys must take like a big sense of pride and ownership of that. I think it's really cool.
Totally. And it's like, I enjoy that part, I get to get away from a screen and a computer and work with my hands and do, something that requires a different skill set. And it's something that's definitely been fun. And like, I think a lot of people don't realize that there is so much creativity that goes into that. I'm like solving a problem of, they want, I often get this where they see something on Pinterest, they say, I want this. And I'm like, okay, well, the one you see on Pinterest is for 50 people. You have 350 people. So the size of this is going to be, we're talking 8-foot sheets of plywood. We are going to have something to hold it up in place. So by the time everything is said and done, this thing is massive. I need to rent a U-Haul, all this stuff. And I love being able to like go through that with them and plan and like add cool things. And I just think it's like such a fun way to think outside the box too. But it's definitely something that just, I don't think a lot of people think about, like when they say like, oh, yeah, this seating chart. And I'm like, great. Well, I need about 3 weeks to at least source, make it, we got to think about how to transport it. I get people who are like, well, I'm in San Diego. I'm like, well, tough luck. Like, I'm like, I mean, we could freight ship this for $2,000 if you really want to, but other than that, I'm like, oh yeah, I know we're gonna have to rethink this, like based on where you are, or sometimes I'll even tell people, I'm like, if you're really after this look and you live in Oklahoma, you need to find somebody local. Like, I'm gonna say, give away my business, because if this is something that you envision for your wedding day, I'm like, I can do it. I'm happy to do it, but please know that you're going to pay more in shipping costs than you are for the actual product. So some people are like, thank you for telling me that. Or like, if I don't specialize in something, I'll say, this actually probably would be easier, faster, and better for you to source on Etsy. Like, I don't do that. I don't do custom cut acrylic with this sort of stain or gold. Like, there's certain things where I'm like, honestly, you'll be able to even reuse them. They're probably a better quality. Someone's been doing this a lot longer than me. So I'm not ever scared to kind of do that too, where I'm like, no, I'm like, I'm willing to try, but it's not going to be worth your time. For how many hours I'm going to spend like fiddling with this, I'm probably just better off giving you to somebody else. But
Well,
so I hear that too. I just feel like it's like my due diligence of being a good partner for as a wedding vendor for you, of like being like, look, I know your florist can probably handle that. Like, talk to her or him, like ask your DJ about, being the MC rather than hiring somebody different. Like, it's like all these things about how to cross and problem solve and stuff like that. And I feel like you probably hear this too, like you kind of become therapist for a lot of your couples. And it's like, it's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll problem solve, figure out how to do this and get it done.
well, like you said, that just goes back to earlier, just knowing what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and just having that self assurance of being like, yeah, that's not my thing. Someone else needs to do it, or whatever.
Yeah.
Because it's getting past that point of like I can do everything. And
Yeah.
so it's tough. It's that tough balance. So
Yeah. Or telling someone like, look, I tried this. It was horrible. It was a disaster. I don't ever want to do it again. Hire somebody else.
yeah. No, it's like even just not to get in the down the videography thing, but like the live streaming right now, it's like everything, everybody, right? And like I see like every day, like I'll wake up, like people posting, I'm like, hey, so trying to figure all this stuff out. I'm like, I have been figuring that out since like March 1st when like all this stuff shut
Yeah.
down. You know what I mean? Like I spent like 5 months trying to like figure this out. Like
Yeah.
but you, like you said, you need to know like what is worth your time or not, or what, you can figure out or not. But it's just not like taking everything and just trying to,
Totally.
be in the, what is
I,
it? What is it? The jack of all trades, master of none, or whatever.
Totally. And it's like, I often joke with my husband and I'm like, I too suffer from I can make that syndrome, where it's like I see something, I'm like, ah, I could make that. Do I make it ever? No. But it's like I always see myself as like, well, I think it's because I'm a doer, and I'm like, okay, if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to Google it. I'm going to watch a video. I'm going to take a class. I'm going to learn. I'm going to read. It's like I don't really give up that easily, but at the same time, I know my limits. I know when it's like your money is better spent doing it either through me or through someone else, or not on your own. It's sometimes I even have clients who we didn't end up ever working together for wedding invitations, and they'll come back a year later. They're like, yeah, that was the biggest mistake of my life. I should have worked with somebody who knew they were doing, like all of mine got sent back because I didn't have enough postage. All this stuff where it's like, trust me, I am the expert in this. Like, I will help you and guide you.
No, my big thing is I'm always just like, like whatever. Like I'll like look at some other video. I'm just like whatever. Like that's no good. Like and I'm always like, well, I could have done that.
Yeah.
Because like yeah, like you guys, like you were saying, you handle all the shipping, right, and everything. If you're sending out the
Hmm.
invitations, I mean, even stuff like that is like so much work, and trying to worry about like the postage and stuff coming back.
Totally. And it's like, it's a big fear. And at the end of the day, it's like just the postage alone for a wedding suite often, is several $100s, if not thousands, if you're spending like doing vintage postage. It's like, my job is to make sure that this reaches your customer. And it's like, a lot of people are like, well, I'll do the assembly, or I'll take care of that, because they think it's like just playing with stickers and glue. And it's like, trust me, there is a wrong way of doing this. And it's because I sent invitations like for my very first client that all came back and learned the hard way that you shouldn't do this or a wax seal on the outside, all this stuff. So it's like, I know because I failed and I am now going to pass on my learnings to you.
Yeah, my wife had to send she had to send something out end of the year. I don't know, something because of working from home, and we had to mail all this crap from the house, like passwords or something for online learning to the kids. And like for like a week, we kept getting like all these like return to sender, return like all, the thing was wrong or the post. I'm like, what are you doing here? Like we got like
Yeah.
15 of these 30 things back. Like, what do you do? It's like, oh yeah, I got it. But it is like even just trying to get, crap out in the mail is too
Yeah.
challenging. This has been really fun. I appreciate. I know it's been a little meandering path today, but it's been good.
No, it's been good. I feel like that's like life right now. If 2020 is a word, it's a meandering path. So
Yeah.
I feel like it works.
Um, Before we let you go, what is, maybe I always try to ask this at the end of these, and it's a hard question, so you can take a second, but what is there something that you wish that more people knew about, what you guys do, what, that people are always asking, or that you wish that more people thought about, or that you want people to know about, all the different kind of work and design stuff that you do?
Oh yeah, leave me with the loaded question at the end. I think, honestly, I wish, and this is something that I'm just like passionate about teaching people about is like, I I wish more people we started to get out of that stereotype that the arts in general are not a career. And this goes for somebody who wants to start their own art, or creative business, or to somebody who is trying to obtain a vendor that does that or work with an artist. Like, I feel like for a long time, our society has basically said that, the creative arts are not, they're a hobby. They're cute and they're fun and it's what you do on the side. And I couldn't disagree more because, there's living proof. I'm one of them that you can turn something that you were passionate about into a career and be successful at it and continue to learn and grow and all that. And I wish that more people knew that, like, when you reach out to me and ask for, to work together and all this stuff, that, I'm somebody who takes my job very seriously, and it's something that I absolutely love to do. And so every single inquiry, quote, contract, email is very thought out on my end. I don't use any sort of boilerplate text. Like, I really want to get to know my clients. So that's something I think is maybe a more encompassing thing of people. I want people to know that about, the creative industry. But for me in general, I think it would be just that I'm an artist, and that's what I love to do. It's like being able to express my creativity through paper and color choices and textures and calligraphy and all that kind of stuff is how I not only pay my bills, but it's like what fuels me and what like fills my heart with joy. I just love it. And so when you work with me, that's something that you get. And it's, I hope that my clients see that when they work with me. So I hope that answers it.
That's a good answer. Yes. And yes. And do remind, yes, every email you send, even if you're filling out a contact form, there is somebody like me or Camille that's, that's seeing that and that's responding to that. So, do take care and, ghosting vendors or whatever you want to call it. Remember that there are people there that are writing these emails and, like you said,
totally
thinking out and writing things. And I do think that's a good point. And yes, art should be appreciated. And yes, all the good things.
Yeah.
That was good. This has been good. I'm so glad we got this. You were great on the Best Made Wedding stationery invitation, whatever we called it, roundtable. If people want to check that out, I'll probably try to link it on this. And this has been great as well. I'm so glad that we could get this going. If people want to learn more about you and all the different services that you provide, where would they check out?
You can find me on the web at www.robinsoncreativehouse.com or on Instagram at Robinson Creative House. And you'll find pretty much anything and everything you would ever want to know about me and my dogs.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. If you're interested in coming on a future episode of the podcast, you can go to www.bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest. And that's a nice, easy questionnaire that we have to get you in the system. I don't even think I made you fill that out because you're so cool. And I just said, we're going to do this. So, but if you're someone new, that would be a great way to get in, and we can try to figure out if it'll be a good fit. And thanks again. And I appreciate everything and your time, and hope you stay safe, and we'll get through all this.
Well, thank you. I love coming on this podcast. So thanks for your time too. I had a good time.
Thanks again, and check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thanks so much.